Hello, and thank you for your interest in the Spotlight on Humanities in Higher Education grant program offered by the National Endowment for the Humanities. I'm Rebecca Boggs, a program officer in the Division of Education Programs and part of the leadership team for the Spotlight program. This webinar is recorded and will roughly follow the program page where you clicked the link to start this video, and especially the notice of funding opportunity, which we'll get to in a minute. Joining me today is my colleague, PC Fleming, another program officer in our division on the Spotlight team.
Thanks, Rebecca. If you have additional questions after this webinar, please join us for a live Q&A session at 1 p.m. Eastern Time on Thursday, August 24th. The link is posted in the Notice of Funding Opportunity and on the program page just below this video. You can also reach out to us anytime through the program's email address, spotlight@neh.gov. There's a real person monitoring that inbox, and we'll get back to you as soon as we can. The draft deadline is September 6th. We can't read drafts after that date, but if you send us anything before then, we're happy to speak with you about it. You can send us whatever you'd like feedback on. Some applicants send us a full draft, others just a 2-sentence idea. You're not required to send us anything, but previous applicants have found it helpful to get that little bit of feedback. So please reach out. Hearing ideas at preliminary stages is one of the most exciting parts of our job, and we really enjoy talking to potential applicants. So that's a quick overview of the dates, and now back to Rebecca to hear more about the program.
Before you begin your application, you'll want to know more about the grant program and about what the application requires. That's what we'll cover today. We'll follow the steps on the program page, and most of our time will be spent on step 1, which you'll see just below this video. Before we get to that first step, though, you'll see a basic summary of the grant program. As with all NEH grant programs, your proposal should present a project that meets the requirements of the particular grant program. On the left side of the program page, just below the name of the grant, is a description of what this grant program aims to do. In general, the Spotlight program supports the exploration and development of small projects that would benefit underserved populations through the teaching and study of the humanities at small to medium-sized institutions of higher education. 2 goals set this grant apart from other NEH awards. First, we designed this grant line with the goal of supporting institutions and faculty who might not have received much support from the NEH in the past. Second, the Spotlight program can support small projects. Your project should benefit the institution rather than merely your own individual research or teaching agenda, but you can work on a small scale with focus, even revising a single course or professional development for a small group of faculty. We offered this grant for the first time last year, and we've made a few changes for this year. The biggest change is that we have clarified the kinds of institutions we aim to support. As you see on the slide, we have now defined the size of institutions we consider to be small and medium-sized. Under 5,000 undergraduates, full-time equivalent, for 2-year colleges, or under 10,000 undergraduates, full-time equivalent, for 4-year colleges and universities. We also expect the institutions to meet at least one of these 5 criteria, being community colleges, minority-serving institutions, colleges and universities that are rural or that enroll a majority, more than 50%, of students receiving Pell Grants, or institutions that have not received funding from the NEH's Division of Education Programs in the last 5 years, so since 2018. If you are applying as a nonprofit organization or state, local, or tribal government, you'll need to demonstrate that the schools you plan to work with meet these criteria. We draw a slight distinction between those criteria under intended applicants, which specifically identify the institution's Spotlight aims to benefit, and the eligibility criteria, which define who is allowed to apply to the program. The Spotlight program is open to accredited 2- and 4-year colleges and universities, and also to nonprofit organizations and state, local, or federally recognized Native American tribal governments whose work advances the humanities at these institutions and among their faculty and students. So if you're part of an organization that supports the teaching and learning of the humanities at colleges and universities, we can help. If you're the project director heading the project, make sure that you're affiliated with and submitting it through an eligible institution of higher education or nonprofit organization or government. You cannot apply for this grant as an individual. The institution is the applicant, not you. The applicant institution must make a substantial contribution to the project. If your institution simply distributes the money to others, then you would be considered a fiscal agent and wouldn't be eligible. Foreign and for-profit entities are also ineligible to apply. If your institution is eligible, we hope you will consider how it fits within the intended applicants categories and whether Spotlight is your best choice for seeking NEH support. If you have any questions, you can always send them to us at spotlight@neh.gov. You'll reach a program analyst in the Division of Education Programs, and even if it turns out your institution or your project idea isn't quite right for Spotlight, we'd be happy to help you find a grant that is the right fit. And if Spotlight sounds like a good choice, the rest of this video will help you get started on your application. On the right side of the program page, you'll find the grant snapshot. As you can see, this program includes 2 funding levels. Exploration projects are up to $25,000 and the grant lasts up to 1 year. Development projects are up to $60,000 for up to 2 years. I'll say more about these 2 funding levels in just a moment. Under the grant snapshot, you'll also see the deadline. This year, applications are due October 18th. And as PC mentioned, the draft deadline is September 6th. It's not required to send us a draft, but many applicants find it useful to do so. So that's the basic idea. The grant is designed to support humanities teachers, and you can choose between those 2 levels, exploration and development. We'll turn now to step 1, which on the program page is just below the video. Starting from the bottom of this screenshot, you'll see that we are able to share examples from last year. On the program page, you can find sample application narratives for both levels of grant funding. You can also see a list and basic information about all the awards we funded in the 2 levels. Above that, our frequently asked questions document and some examples of a new section, the organizational profile, which we'll mention in a minute. And when you're ready to apply, you'll find the link to grants.gov under the application materials heading. But the most important document for you to consider is the Notice of Funding Opportunity, which we call the NOFO, or sometimes the Program Guidelines. That's the one at the top circled in red. In this PDF, you'll find the complete information about the grant, including instructions for writing the narrative and putting together the other materials you'll need in order to apply. The rest of this webinar will focus on the NOFO. If you'd like to follow along, you can download the PDF on the program page at the link shown here. This webinar should not be a replacement for the NOFO, and we won't cover every single detail, but we will give an overview and will help you navigate the document to find what we need. Every NEH NOFO begins with an executive summary, which will include the information we just went over, including the purpose of the grant, the 2 levels, the deadlines, and the allowable project start dates. Below the executive summary, you'll find the table of contents. The first 3 sections tell you about the program. The 4th section tells you what you need to apply, including a table of items to make sure you've included everything you need for a complete application. And the 5th section tells you how your proposal will be reviewed. The NOFO's first section describes the purpose of the grant. This section repeats some of the language on the program page, and I'd like to expand a bit on the kinds of projects the Spotlight programs support, and particularly to highlight 3 phrases. First is that this is a grant from the Division of Education Programs at the National Endowment for the Humanities, so your project must be centered on the teaching and study of the humanities. On the slide is a quotation from the NEH's founding legislation, which is also available on our website. It provides a definition of the humanities, listing what we generally consider humanities disciplines, including modern languages and humanistic social sciences like anthropology and sociology. The definition also mentions our diverse heritage, traditions, and history. It's up to you in your application to explain how your project relates to the humanities as understood by the NEH. Second is that the Spotlight program can support small projects. Some of our other grants primarily support major curricular revisions, like a whole new minor or changes to a general education program. This grant aims to support smaller projects, which might be accomplished by just a few people within a year or 2. You might create or revise a course or a set of courses, or develop new teaching materials, support student research or experiential learning projects, organize shared reading programs or opportunities for faculty development. Think about what would most impact your campus. But you don't have to keep only within the limits of the campus. You may want to partner with organizations or groups in your community, or engage in workforce preparation that aligns your humanities teaching with students' career or professional goals. And lastly, projects should benefit underserved communities. Again, it's up to you to identify the particular groups that your project would affect. And you should make sure that your project benefits institutions that meet the criteria that I referred to earlier. Once you've determined that your project is a good fit for Spotlight, your next decision is whether to apply at the exploration or development level. Which one you choose depends on the scope of the project, including how long you think it would take and how many people are involved. Exploration projects are up to $25,000 and have a period of performance of up to 1 year. They support administrators, faculty, community members, and humanities nonprofit organizations in planning for a project that would significantly strengthen the teaching of the humanities at colleges or universities. Development projects are up to $60,000 and have a period of performance of up to 2 years. They support divisions, departments, programs, and humanities nonprofit organizations in advancing a single well-defined project or one stage of a larger project. Neither level requires any prior work on this project, and you don't have to have had an exploration grant to apply for a development grant. And neither level requires a particular outcome. A grant at either level could complete a small manageable project or get started on something that might take a little longer. If you're unsure which level is best for you, please get in touch with us. We're happy to talk it through with you. You can see a list of potential projects on pages 2 to 3 of the NOFO, and on our Spotlight program page, you can see lists of everything we funded at the exploration and development levels last year, as well as several sample narratives from funded proposals at each level. Projects at the exploration level can be for up to 1 year of funding, and they're supporting preliminary work on a humanities project that would benefit students. In Spotlight's first year, we funded a small liberal arts college in Idaho to build relationships with local community groups, including a historical society, local indigenous leadership, a Jewish congregation, and the City Department of Arts and Culture. Spotlight funding will help create an advisory board to develop the college's public history curriculum. Another project at the exploration level will support a student-driven publishing lab, helping connect with faculty who might develop assignment in their courses. 2 others will develop a course in digital humanities at an HBCU and an online course in business writing and the humanities at a university in Puerto Rico. Projects at the development level can request up to 2 years of funding. They should advance a single well-designed project to enrich the teaching and learning of the humanities. Last year, we funded projects to train K-12 teachers about the diverse histories and cultures in Connecticut, and to create open educational resources at a North Carolina community college, which would replace textbooks that some students had struggled to afford. Spotlight will also support a university that is integrating humanities into its sustainability science program, and another that is developing a student-led podcast about literature and culture. And a school in New Jersey, most of whose students are working adults, will diversify the content of its required humanities courses. Those are just a few of the projects we funded in the program's first year. The sky's the limit for what you can put together to serve your community's needs, and you can always reach out to us to share drafts or to talk about your project ideas. When you've decided which level, it's time to start creating the separate parts of your application. I'll turn things over to my colleague PC to explain a bit more about them.
Thanks, Rebecca. I will bring us back to the NOFO, to the Notice of Funding Opportunity, and we had left off on page 3. The few pages after that provide the details about eligibility and other requirements that Rebecca's covered. I'd like to pick us up again on page 9, where you'll see this table listing the required parts of the application. When reviewers see your proposal, they see it as a single PDF, but when you upload it, you'll do so in separate parts. This table looks slightly different from previous years, and we hope it's clearer. At the top are the attachments that you need to create before you apply. The first 5 are required, and attachments 6 through 8 are needed in special circumstances. If you have a grants office or an Office of Sponsored Research, they can help you with those parts. If not, reach out to us and we can assist you. Make sure these components are saved as PDF files and be ready to upload them to grants.gov. The bottom section of the table lists the forms that you will create in your grants.gov workspace. The one exception is the budget justification, which will be attached as a PDF. So before you're ready to apply, it's the top half of the table that you'll want to be focusing on. I'll explain these attachments individually, but remember that they should all work together. Think of your proposal as a unified argument for why your project deserves to be funded by NEH. You won't be in the room to explain yourself, so make sure your proposal makes the strongest case. Be strategic, be explicit, and be clear. Attachments 3 through 5 are somewhat self-explanatory. The work plan is your schedule for the grant period. You'll provide bios or resumes for the personnel involved in the grant, and you need to include a letter of support from the institution or organization. I'd suggest getting started on that soon so you can make sure you get hold of a dean or a provost in time for them to write that letter. Attachments 1 and 2, though, deserve a little bit of extra attention in this video. Attachment 2 is the organizational profile, which is a newly required component. It wasn't part of last year's application. Your organizational profile should be a relatively short document, about a paragraph. But you need to explain why your college or university qualifies as small or medium-sized and how it meets at least one of the 5 additional criteria. If you're a nonprofit or a state, local, or tribal government, then describe the colleges and universities your project aims to benefit. We provide a link to the Department of Education's College Navigator, where you'll find enrollment data about your institution. You'll use that link to gather most of the information you need for your organizational profile. The NOFO explains what you should include in each case, and also how to find the right information. You may, if you wish, also use the organizational profile to provide other relevant information. For example, if your project focuses on supporting veterans, you may describe how many veterans are enrolled at the universities involved and what support is currently in place. We provide sample organizational profiles on the program website, and we encourage you to read those to get a sense of what this attachment requires. The other attachment I will describe in detail is the project narrative, but before I get to that, I want to point out the review criteria. They're on pages 28 and 29 of the NOFO, and we recommend you pay close attention to those, since this is how peer reviewers and others at the NEH will be asked to evaluate your proposal. The review criteria are grouped into 4 main headers: intellectual quality, design quality, institutional context, and potential benefit. Intellectual quality comes first because if your project isn't worth doing in terms of its intellectual significance, then it won't matter how organized you are or how many students it might affect. But if you do have a great intellectual focus of your project, you also have to combine that with a feasible design that can get the job done to benefit the humanities at your institution. The third criterion, institutional context, describes how reviewers will consider the match between your institution and the particular grant program. Make sure your narrative and organizational profile explain how your institution or the colleges and universities you're working with qualifies as small or medium-sized, how it meets at least one of the additional criteria for intended applicants, and how it benefits underserved communities or students. Finally, we want to know how your project will make a difference. Show us what its benefit will be for students, for faculty, the institution, organization, or the community, and how it will improve humanities teaching and learning. In general, look at what's written in these review criteria and be sure that an intelligent reader will have strong, positive answers to how well your proposal addresses each one. You will address those review criteria primarily in the project narrative, which is attachment 1 on the list I showed you a moment ago. The narrative is the most important part of your application. After the cover page, this is the first thing reviewers should see, and you should consider it your primary focus. The narrative must be 5 pages or fewer. It's okay to single space it, but you cannot go onto a 6th page. Applications over the limit are removed from the pool as ineligible, so no matter how good your proposal is, we won't get a chance to see it. On page 11 of the NOFO, you'll find this chart, which links each of the required sections of the narrative to the review criteria. The whole narrative should be written so that a generalist audience could understand it, and you should carefully address or answer each of the items under each section header in turn: humanities content and activities, project personnel, and institutional context and benefit. I won't go over each section now, but I'll encourage you to read carefully the descriptions in the NOFO. These are probably the most important pages, since they tell you what reviewers expect to see. One more part of your application I'll mention briefly, and that's the research and related budget form. You'll fill this out in your grants.gov workspace when you're ready to apply, and the page looks something like this screenshot. This form will automatically integrate into your application based on what you enter there. Because this is a government-wide form, be sure to read the guidelines in the NOFO about how exactly to fill it out. I know there's a lot of detail there, but don't let it overwhelm you. Many applicants find it helpful to reach out to their grants office for guidance. All projects are required to also submit a budget justification to complement the budget form. That gets attached actually as part of the budget form. So be sure to title that file correctly and to save it as a PDF to ensure that it successfully integrates into the application file that our reviewers will see. Finally, there are a few things that the Spotlight program cannot fund. You can find a more complete listing of funding restrictions on page 28 of the NOFO, but I want to caution you against some of the most common pitfalls we see. We cannot fund the promotion of a particular political, religious, or ideological point of view, advocacy for a particular program of social or political action, or support for specific policies or legislation. The NEH also cannot fund whose project's main focus falls outside the humanities. We most often see this with projects focused on the creative arts. If your project is focused on the creation of art in any form, you may want to be looking to the NEA rather than the NEH. And finally, we don't fund work on educational methods or standardized testing. We do, of course, fund work about teaching the humanities. That's our main goal, but not about educational methods or standardized tests. If you're unsure whether your project runs into any of these restrictions, please ask. Reach out to us. We're happy to help. So now you know what to do to get started on your application, and here's a timeline for when to do it. I hope you can join us for a live Q&A on August 24th at 1 p.m. Eastern. Again, you'll find that link to join the meeting on the program page and in the NOFO. You can send us a draft anytime before September 6th. Send it to us as an attachment. It can be a full draft or just a paragraph, whatever you would like us to provide feedback on. Final applications are due at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time on October 18th, and we recommend submitting before then if you can. You must submit the application through grants.gov. Speaking of grants.gov, the very first thing you should do after watching this video is to ensure that you have these two important things: an active unique entity identifier and current registrations and passwords for login.gov. You'll see an explanation and a link to check this information on pages 26 and 27 of the NOFO. Registration in the System for Award Management, or SAM, can take up to a month to complete, so check on this straight away, especially if you're a first-time applicant or if your institution hasn't recently applied for federal funding. The NEH cannot grant deadline extensions for delayed registration. Your institutional grant administrator or other grant management or sponsored program staff at your institutions are great contacts for guidance if you're not sure where to find this information or who to contact for access. If they can't help you, contact the Federal Service Desk or grants.gov using the contact information on page 33 of the NOFO. Once you're in grants.gov, be sure to select the appropriate package for the level that you intend to apply for so that your application will be evaluated appropriately. That is, be sure to select the ASA prefix for exploration and the ASB prefix for development. Don't let these two slides make you nervous. Since this is an institutional award, it's quite common that the person who writes the grant isn't necessarily the one who uploads it to the website. And as I mentioned, grants offices are often really helpful with this step. So now that we've covered these technical details, I'll turn things back to Rebecca.
Thank you very much for watching this video. We hope it provided some insight into the Spotlight Grant Program. If you have further questions, please consult the FAQs, which you'll find on the program page. It's the first link under Program Resources, just below the link to download the NOFO. I hope you'll also join us on August 24th for a live Q&A session about the program. You can also email questions to us either at the program address, spotlight@neh.gov, or directly to either of us at our own inboxes, which you'll see here. And don't forget, as with most NEH grants, you can send us a draft in advance. This year's draft deadline is September 6th. Thanks again, and we look forward to hearing from you.